As a German, I would think it's the greatest thing that ever happened in my lifetime, and I know very few people Germans who do not think that. As a bank, we know we're going to face some very tough years.
Why?
It is going to be very difficult because my feeling is that the expectancy of the East Germans is
too high.
Too high. The honeymoon is over. We are into very rough times, I think, because the disappointment will be there. I think they will be disappointed because you don't sort of catch up 40 years of capitalistic development that we have had in West Germany within a couple of years. It's going to take some time. It's going to be tough.
Dr. Van Arnhem, you said that in April. What's happened since then? You still agree with what you said then?
I do. I was surprised what I did say. It is going to be tough. It has become even tougher than we thought it would be. I think we in the west of Germany didn't realize what we would face. I think things have come out over these months. I just spoke to an American friend, and he said, "What could be so difficult about this sort of arrangement?" And I tried to think of an example. I said, "Just imagine the New England states had been separated from the United States in 1945. They had developed as a in a totally different system, and all of a sudden, this is 1989. All of a sudden, you as Americans will have to integrate the New England states, having developed totally undemocratic, totally uncapitalistic, no market economy whatsoever, and here they are, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Maine, here they are being a part of you. How difficult would this be?" And this friend of mine agreed. It is very difficult.
Dr. Dietrich Bayer, I had to, at the last minute I said, I've got his name wrong, so that's why I'm hesitating. What's your reaction?
Well, my reaction is basically positive and optimistic, because in economic terms, I think this unification in economics is manageable, and I don't think it will be that disruptive as many people think, because in the long run, I think, first of all, the resources there are good, basically good human resources, and techniques and capital will come forward very soon once we have overcome the initial period of trouble, which Dr. Van Arnhem mentioned. There is, of course, some 18 months ahead of us, still much to be done, and we will have a very hard time. But economically speaking, I think it's manageable, and above all, I think that the old Federal Republic of Germany will benefit, because this recultivation, if I may say so, of former GDR means a tremendous demand program in economic terms, and I think this is a great chance. It's a chance for investors, and it's a chance for business, and that's, as I see it, from a purely economic point of view.
Dr. Norman von Schoppenberg, how about from your perspective?
Well, I think one thing is different to what most of us thought in spring this year. We found out that the economy of the old GDR is much more deteriorated, I would even say dilapidated, than we thought. The industry is inefficient and has a very old plant and very old machinery. So the investment which has to be financed is much more than we thought. But anyhow, I agree with Dr. Bayer. There's a very good chance that we will succeed in bringing this economy in a rather few years into a state which is comparable with the state of the Western German Länder.
You're with an organization called the Treuhand Anstalt. What does that mean?
You have to imagine that practically all companies in the old GDR with more than 10 employees were in so-called people's ownership. That means practically 95% of the whole economy. And all these companies have been transferred into the fiduciary ownership of the Treuhandanstalt. And so this institute has the task to administer and to sell at least 8,000 companies to private owners. And this is a task, well, which has never been a thing which has never happened to anybody else at any time before in such a dimension.
I want to ask our two other panelists here what relationship the Deutsche Bank has to the Treuhand. How do you work together? I mean, you have the capital, they've got the companies.
Well, what we try to do, we work closely with the Treuhandanstalt, which is in the process of privatization of these 8,000 plus companies. We try to help finance these companies very often as the so-called liquidity loans under the guarantee of the Treuhandanstalt, because as was already mentioned, there is no balance sheet of our standards which we could look at and say this is a credit we would lend on. If we look at, first of all, there is no balance sheet, period, and secondly, if there is a balance sheet, it's not the balance sheet we are used to, set up by different standards. So we do need the backup from the Treuhandanstalt for the time being to keep these companies afloat until it is decided, are they going to be privatized, are they going to be closed down, are there going to be new partners who are going to buy these companies. Until this is determined, we are looking for the support of the Treuhandanstalt. We are in the medium term, on a medium-term basis, we are very much interested in helping and making these companies into our customer base. We know that, and I agree with my neighbors here, we know that here we have an economy which is run down. We have a highly educated and highly determined population, that is what makes us think that the eastern part of Germany will come around and will become a very major part of the German economy. There will be a growth factor, which we already see in the western part of Germany, which is considerable, and this will also be a part of the eastern part of Germany. The synergy between Western German economy, what used to be the Federal Republic, and the eastern part of Germany, once they have turned around, will be, we think, considerable.
Dr. Bayer, can you help us understand the Treuhand from the Berliner Bank standpoint? How does it work? I'm going to get back to our representative here, but from your standpoint.
Yeah, Berliner Bank is presently negotiating with Treuhandanstalt to buy up a former GDR bank. So we know what's all about. We don't know the price yet. We haven't got a Deutschmark opening balance sheet. We don't know anything. But we are decided to buy it. This is how it works in practice. We want to buy this former GDR bank, and we will buy it. We are already closely cooperating, and the formal settlement will come later. This is how it works in practice.
Let's say that you're the guy, and you go knocking on the door of the Treuhand. Where is it, and how does it work?
Well, we knew these people for quite some time because they were part of our predecessor bank before 1950, and that part that was left over was integrated in the former GDR State Bank, and it was taken out after 1st of April and became independent. Commercial bank under the new legislation in former GDR. And this part will be integrated into Berliner Bank. And we are already closely cooperating. We send our staff there. We try to educate them, to give them our know-how, software and hardware. And this is how it should work in practice. So we know very well what it means to integrate former GDR into our system. But let me add one thing, because this number of 8,000 was mentioned here. That is only one part of the economy, and probably the minor part. We have great hope that there is a high number of newly founded small and medium-sized enterprises, companies, small companies, businesses in former GDR. Up to now, within 5 months, the number is a little higher than 200,000 already. And it will be, by the end of 91, it will probably reach 500,000 new small and medium-sized businesses. And they will absorb all the people that have been fired. And I think this part it was almost forgotten about in GDR, former GDR, because those small and medium-sized businesses didn't exist anymore.
Let me go back to what you said about the Treuhand and the bank. Will you eventually pay money to the Treuhand?
Yes, certainly. We will have to.
And where does that money for that bank you're going to buy go?
Beg your pardon?
Who gets the money?
The money the money goes to the public sector, which has a high deficit. It's one way of reducing public debt. Privatization is the catchword. And all that part of the former GDR state economy, which is going to be privatized, is one way of reducing the huge public debt. And this is how it works. And I think in practice we have some success already.
Let me ask Dr. von Scharpenberg to give us the nuts and bolts of the Treuhand. Where is it? How many people work there? What kind of power? Where does it get its power? That's enough, I guess.
Start with the first question. The Treuhand headquarters are in Berlin, former East Berlin. The Treuhand has 15 branch offices in the big cities of former East Germany. The headquarters now employ about 500 people, and the branch offices altogether 450. I guess that we have to double both numbers until we are capable to work really efficiently and effective.
How did you get there? What kind of a background do you have, and was it a political appointment?
No. I started my career in industry. I've been 17 years in industry, then I changed over to administration and became state secretary in a Ministry of Finance in one of the Länder.
Länder is a state, like our state?
That's the states, yes, in Lower Saxony in West Germany. And after that appointment I came to the Treuhand 2 months ago.
And what's your responsibility, what's your job?
My job is the coordination of the 15 affiliates, of the 15 branch offices.
You said before we went on the air that you had loaned somebody from the Deutsche Bank to the Treuhand, or explain that. How are they finding all the 1,000 people that work for them?
Well, let me respond to this one question. How did we respond to the person that we lent, so to speak, to the Treuhandanstalt? We just knew some people from Treuhandanstalt to ask us, we do need good young people who are willing to work not an 8-hour day, but a 12-hour day maybe, or maybe a 14-hour day, maybe an 11-hour day. And we asked one young lady who we think, or we thought, and this obviously has proven right, is very capable, who has worked within our bank for the former GDR accounts before, so she knew the atmosphere, she knew some of the companies. We asked her whether she would be willing to sort of be on a land lease basis to the Treuhandanstalt, and she agreed to go there for 1 year.
How about the Berliner Bank? Do you have anybody working there?
No, we are a medium-sized bank and we haven't got that much staff available. What we are doing in this context is in a different field. We are trying to integrate the bank I mentioned before on a very active basis. We have sent some 200 staff, active people they are, to work in this East German bank and to help them to develop to a normal commercial bank Western style. That means to say we are doing the job on a different level, but we do it also. We have set free some, set free is not the right word, but we have delegated some 250 staff to East Berlin.
I'd be interested in knowing what are the major differences between the bank as it was run in East Germany then and the way the West German banks run?
Well, the former East German bank wasn't really run, really. It was administrated by people who distributed money and collected money. And that's all they did. They had some, I don't know, 12 of bank products. Western banks have some 200, 400 different bank products to offer. And they have to learn everything. They have to learn our accounting system. They have to learn our computer systems, about our whole software, customers' service. They are not used to services. Service is one thing that they're lacking altogether in former GDR. They don't know what it means to service people. And banks are a service industry. So that's what we are in fact doing. We are starting from scratch. Teaching them banking, that's one thing, which is very time-consuming.
We keep hearing, and the people we're talking to, both from the East and the West, that there's a resentment between the different parts of the country. It comes out, we hear about it in different ways, and I want to ask all three of you to talk about that. You're all in contact with people who live in the eastern part of the country. Is there a resentment of the big West coming over and taking over and telling them how to run their operation?
My experience in practical life is that we do not see this resentment. The cooperation between those who are coming from the West and our employees from the East is, I think, rather good. And they are learning quite a lot, as I feel, usually without resentment.
Well, the Deutsche Bank Group has set up a joint venture bank with an East German bank as of the 1st of July, and they have employed not less than 8,500 people from the German Democratic Republic. So there's a very close cooperation with, and the Deutsche Bank has delegated numerous people to the former East Germany to staff these 150 branches. The cooperation between the Western staff, let's call it that, and what used to be the GDR staff has been very well. I would agree with you, they have a lot to learn, which does not, I don't want to sound sort of arrogant about it, but they did have a different system. They do have to learn what data processing means. They do have to learn what making a loan means, looking at a balance sheet. They didn't have a balance sheet of our standards. So they do have to learn a lot. They do learn a lot. They're very eager to learn. They're very welcome. And they have become colleagues of ours in a very short time.
If something goes wrong today, what is it that goes wrong?
It's the organizational part. It goes entirely wrong. But to answer your question, we can't. We find no resentment whatsoever. And before we decided to embark on this merger with the old Stadtbank, we asked the employees to express their views, and there was a unanimous decision in favor of this merger. And we know that they are very eager to live up to our Western standards. And to give you an idea what it means in terms of staff, they have some slightly over 1,000 staff, and we will reduce it by some 20%, and all the rest will be re-educated and restructured, and those 200 will slowly leave the bank without any major problem. No resentments, but the sort of business they did well was collecting savings and allocating loans to state-owned companies. That's the only transaction they knew what to do, but there's no service really. It's a distributional act.
Some American told me this while we were here, that they had, I don't know where this comes from, but they had looked at the top 10 stock trading companies in the United States and found that they had 1,100,000 employees, and that the Treuhand represents 8,000 companies with 3.9 million employees. I don't know if that means anything, but once you start that kind of comparison, I wanted to ask you, when I had a chance, is that an accurate figure, and why so many employees with that number of companies?
Well, the employees of the companies of the Treuhand are practically the workforce of the former GDR. Okay, there's a public sector with quite a lot of employees, but practically all people who had been employed in industry, trade, services, commerce, had been have been employed in those companies which now belong to the Treuhandanstalt. The efficiency, the productivity of these people is due to the well, inefficiency of the system, not very high. So our problem is not to reduce the number of employees. Our problem is to increase the productivity of the whole economy, so that so net production and number of employees come into a good relation again.
By the way, before we go any further, can anybody translate Treuhandanstalt into English?
Yeah, I am used to this sort of question from my American friends. I call it trust agency. It's an agency which is entrusted to privatize formerly state-owned property.
Anything like this ever been done before?
I can't think of a historical example. There wasn't any of it.
I would say no. This is unique in the world.
Who runs it?
It's run by a board of 9 members, and it's owned by the federal government.
And who appointed the 9 members?
The federal government?
Are they political appointees?
No, definitely not. They practically all of them come out of big German companies.
Is this Treuhand critical to the success of making this change in the East?
Well, they are the owners of presently the owners of the East German industry, so they would be critical. If you mean by critical that it would depend on them, yes. That they are holding up the privatization of the East German economy, I would say no. They are very, very instrumental of helping us to do it, or helping the what used to be the East German industry to become a private industry.
We had an interview with a woman in a restaurant in a little town of Nauern, and she was between the state-owned and the private, and she's waiting for the Treuhand to tell her how much she has to pay for that. Does that sound right to you?
Could be.
Yeah.
And how long will she have to wait, and what's the process?
Well, may I explain this special process?
Sure.
I think it's quite interesting. You see, the restaurants had been in the ownership of practically more or less one company in every district. That means we had 15 restaurant companies owning all restaurants in the GDR, each one with a local monopoly. The Treuhand tries to privatize, to sell these restaurants, but not to sell these companies, to create new private monopolies, but they try to sell it one by one. If you do this in a normal negotiating, on a normal negotiating basis, it takes quite a long time. So we stopped the whole selling process, developed a system how to sell it, and now we will sell within about a time of 2 to 3 months, or even less, 9,000 restaurants, about 15,000 retail stores, and do this rather quickly. But this woman was waiting now for about 2 months until this thing happens.
Dr. von Arnim, This woman comes to you at the Deutsche Bank and says, she told us that the price was something around $200,000. She comes to you and says, I want to buy this bank. Will the Deutsche Bank finance it?
If she can prove that she is the owner, or that she rents this restaurant, we will look at it as we would at any other person that comes to us and wants financing for a restaurant. We would have the same standards. If she could prove that she is a capable person in running a restaurant, that she has the equipment, if she doesn't, we would hopefully finance it. Yes, we would.
But is the Berliner Bank, by the way, operating yet separately?
No, we're operating on the same basis, but I would add one thing, and that is if we had an unconditioned guarantee by the trust agency, we would also finance it.
An unconditioned
it's an intermediary
guarantee.
step which could be taken.
In other words, the trust agency is guaranteeing the loans?
That's right.
Usually, it is not guaranteeing the loans which are taken in the process of privatization by the new private owners. That's not the business which we have to do.
We would extend a loan if you did so.
But that's boring.
It is. It is boring.
It's boring?
But it's,
it is boring.
it's a time-saving device.
We would go beyond that. We would look at the credit for itself. If this woman could prove that she is the owner, or if she rents this restaurant, and if the Treuhandanstalt has said, go ahead, you have it, go ahead, rent it out, run this restaurant, we would look at the credit by itself. We would not depend on the guarantee of the Treuhandanstalt.
I assume most of you talk to people in the United States, especially the bankers here. Let me just start by asking Dr. Bauer, what are your American banking friends asking you about, and what's their reaction to all of this going on in Germany?
Our American friends keep asking us whether we have already invested there, whether we are already doing business, and they are decided to follow suit if we had started already. This is the general feeling. They are not doing the first step, but if the Germans have stepped in, they would follow suit. This is at least the experience I have from the American Chamber here in Germany. People who are already in Western Germany and would like to go eastwards. They wait for the Germans. If they are there, they are following suit.
Dr. von Arnim, but what do your American friends say?
Our American friends say, are you as confused as we are? And we would then basically answer the same way as Mr. Bayer said, is they're waiting for us to go ahead. And then they will follow suit. There have been many, many talks with American companies, with international companies, British, Japanese, American, who are waiting for things to go ahead. Well, the very basic things, that the ownership of the property has been determined, that they can build a hotel on this very property, that there is no claim by a former owner who has been the owner until 1945, 1949, 1953. And once this is determined, they're willing to do that, because East Germany is a very interesting part of our country. And East Berlin is a very interesting part of our city. So they are waiting for us to go ahead.
Were you born in East Germany?
I was born in Berlin, in the western part of Berlin, but I grew up in what then became East Germany.
When did you leave?
At the end of the war.
Anybody else here
1945.
spend much time in East Germany? Westerners. Let me go back to the American question. Do you have any contact with Americans at the Treuhand? Are they interested at all?
As far as I can see, the American companies with affiliates, well-established affiliates in Western Germany, are already quite active in negotiating in deals in Eastern Germany. I think those American companies which are coming from across the Atlantic at the moment, they are more hesitating.
We're hearing that Americans are reluctant it all to come this way, that there's no money left in the United States, and I mean, these are all generalities, and I would ask the Dr. Beyer to start with, how do you see the United States from Germany at this point? What's your view of
Well, the United States, as you may know, are heading for a minor recession, if I may say so. And that means trouble, domestic troubles, so that the investment abroad is probably not a very, very important question at present. But the United States always was a big investor abroad. And if the yields are all right, and they will be all right in Eastern Germany, they will come forward, there's no doubt. But at present, I think the inner domestic problem is how to avoid recession and how to make it a mild recession in order not to spread this movement all over the world. This is, as we see at present, the United States, and that is also behind this acute dollar weakness.
Dr. Byron?
Well, we feel that the United States presently tends to, as you were mentioning, tends to look at itself for very good reasons. They first of all have an economic problem, and they secondly have a problem with the Gulf crisis. And I can see the point of the Americans not having the time and the energy to look at the outside, what can we do in the immediate future in what used to be what is now the eastern part of Germany.
The next, how long do you think you'll be in business, the Trihan?
Well, I think we'll have a very active business during the next 5 years. And I think we should have done the bigger part of our job after these 5 years. Then it will slowly go down, and I would say after 10 years we will have to decide whether to continue the Triant as an institution or close it up and transfer the rest of the business to other institutions.
Do you anticipate that some properties just aren't even going to sell, that no one's going to be interested in them?
Well, it's not only a question of people being interested in. You see, if you have a plant in the producing industry in which nobody is interested, I think you should close it down.
Is that your job?
That's also the job of the Triant, to close down plants that do not pay out and which cannot be made profitable. But the other point is, the Triant also is the owner of about 40% of the agricultural land. And you can't sell 40% of the agricultural land within a few years. You don't have the demand for this investment into agriculture. So this will take much more time without deteriorating the markets.
In the time remaining, I'd like to broaden the discussion a little bit to, we spent a week in Japan looking at their system and saw that the growth rate there is above 4%, gross national product, at least during the period that we were there, I think it was the third quarter report. The report in this country is it's like 5.5%. I don't know, is that going to be that for the year? Is it going to be that high for the year?
This was the figure for the western part of Germany, the former Federal Republic, the old Federal Republic. And as far as I remember, it was up to including September. Am I
That's
correct?
right, yes. Third quarter, yeah.
I would think it will remain above 5% for the remainder of the year.
My question to you is, in the United States, I think the latest figure is 1.3% for the, I don't know which quarter, but the most recent one. Why is Japan and Germany, why are they doing so well, and why is the United States, from your opinion, not doing so well?
Well, I can answer in economic terms, if you don't mind me.
Please, you're
So,
the chief economist.
Because the Japanese and the Germans are the world record holder in savings, personal savings. And that is the basis for the capital formation. And capital formation is what's lacking in the United States. It's a microeconomic problem which the United States has at present. If the United States were as good savers as the Japanese, as the Germans, money which is being invested immediately in productive use, then they would have the same growth record. But the United States has a much higher propensity to consume, much higher than the Germans and the Japanese. And this is, in a few words, the answer to a question why we are also world record holder in growth. That the two go together. The formation of capital in productive use of capital, which has taken place over 10 years in Japan and Germany, now pays. That's the answer.
Want to try that?
I wouldn't want to add to the chief economist of the Berliner Bank. Nobody can say that.
I assume you two are competitors?
Of course. How?
But
In friendly terms.
Friendly terms, that's right.
But very tough competitors.
We are running out of time, and I want to go back to that interview that you joined us with back in April. And a gentleman by the name of Dr. Rainer Springer, who is University of Economics in East Berlin, was professor. He was our guest, and he had something to say about the future. I want you all to hear this, and we'll close on a discussion that's a little bit beyond German borders, but let's listen to what he has to say. This is back in April.
I would expect the Soviet Union at least has indicated that they are not expecting a neutral Germany. So because I think Gorbachev has recognized that the neutral Germany is more of a danger than a Germany bound into a security system, a new European security system. So what I expect is that united Germany might stay in NATO or become a member of NATO, I mean the eastern part of Germany too, but that the united Germany is at least limiting the military engagement in NATO or even dropping military engagement and restricting to the political activities of NATO on the long run, I mean. And US troops, I think, can only be withdrawn from West Germany if Soviet troops are withdrawn too.
Back in April.
I think it's rather exact on the point, with one exception. Germany will stay in the military alliance in the NATO, also with the military forces, and I'm quite sure that this will last as long as NATO will last, and I'm convinced this will be for decades.
Dr. von Arnim.
I would agree with Herr von Scherpenberg that we will become stay a military part of NATO. I think we will probably expand the task. You might know that it has been indicated by the Federal Chancellor that we might become, the German armed forces could become a part of the multinational peacekeeping force, which until now has not been allowed by our constitution, that we were not allowed to operate, Germany was not allowed for good reasons, I think, beyond the NATO territory. I think in the long run we will become, as has happened for Finland and all the others, will become, if so asked, part of the UN force in troubled spots of the world.
And Dr. Bayer.
Yeah, this prediction has proven right, but I think the nature of NATO has changed completely. It's no longer NATO we were used to. It's a worldwide organization now, which can also be used in other parts of the world, for instance in the Gulf. And you know the discussion which is going on, that the Germans will have to contribute much more to the intervention troops in the Gulf region. And I think this is the future. It's no longer the old NATO we're used to, but it's a new situation.
Because there's been so much written about this and there's so much attention on the Gulf in the United States, I'd be interested in all three of your reaction to what Germany should do, especially on this issue of troops and money. Dr. von Schaffen?
Well, I think it's a question of solidarity, that we show the United States that we are sitting in one boat in this question. On the other hand, I doubt that it would be very sensible to send German troops to the Gulf region at the moment. We have this problem of limiting the activity of German troops in the NATO territory, and until now the NATO still is limited to the North Atlantic territories.
Dr. von Arnim.
Germany has contributed substantially to the financial burden that the United States or that the Western powers have taken in this Gulf conflict. Our Constitution, for the time being, forbids us to sort of send troops, as was just mentioned. I think it will take a while until our Constitution, which needs a two-thirds majority of our Parliament, to be changed to the effect that we will be allowed to delegate troops of any sort to territories outside of the NATO territory. I think it will happen. I think it should happen.
Dr. Bayer.
Well, speaking as a Berliner, I'm in favor of giving much more and coming up with a real burden sharing and not leaving the United States alone, because we owe a lot to the United States. I think this burden sharing should be much more strengthened, and I can't see German troops to go there because this means a change in the Constitution. But financially and in terms of material, I think the Germans are called up to do more in this context, which I call burden sharing, not more than that.
Gentlemen, we're out of time. Thank you very much. I know you're busy, and we appreciate you shedding some light on all this.
Peter, what's happened?